Now, let's talk with Irwin Kula. Irwin, there has been a lot written recently about apologizing and how the act of apology is broken down in our society, in particularly pointing to sort of bad apologies, such as mistakes were made. There's even a song on the radio right now, a dance song that goes, "It's too late to apologize," and it repeats that refrain over and over again. It seems to be a growing cynicism around apology. What is that about?
Well, you know, I think all religions have this notion of cheap grace.
Yeah.
And so even in secular America, we have the cheap grace of apologies, and so I'm sorry is a kind of throwaway. But there are actually some rules for I'm sorry that if you use them appropriately, it works. It's very simple. For me, one, you have to apologize as soon as possible. Kind of immediately. You know how like you let things go and they always get worse. I'm going to get to it. Doesn't feel so good, so I'm going to get to it, and then it always gets worse. And the worse it gets, the harder it is to do. The harder it is to do. When you do it, you generally do it wrong. So you got to, you know, you undermine a colleague at work, or you're impatient with a spouse, or you're impatient with your child, or immediately, I'm sorry. So immediately. And second is no excuses. A lot of times it's, I'm sorry, but. You know what? The person's not interested in the but, and the but takes away from the apology, and then be specific.
I'm sorry, and I'm sorry to break it. I'm sorry, and apologizing and confession are, of course, central to the four wisdom traditions, as you refer to Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism, and Islam. But as you point out in your message, they don't focus on how to forgive others. So say more about that. Yeah, I mean, you dealt with human relationships. I guess I want to know, what would be the impact on diplomacy and world peace if government leaders applied your 4 R's, your formula?
I think we actually have an example of that. The Truth and Reconciliation Committee in South Africa really made a decision that forgiveness is going to be a process. And it's anytime you have something like that that's a process, it's a choice. And it's a serious choice. Forgiveness is as difficult in some ways as war. It just turns out that the end of war is a lot of casualties. And the end of the forgiveness process is hearts that are broken, but in fact, there's nothing as whole as a broken heart. And part of our decision, and I think this is part of what the world's going through right now, is to decide, do the spiritual and religious wisdom traditions in general have anything to contribute to the secular, political, diplomatic efforts? And I think that's a big decision. And religious people have a choice to make in that. We can either be part of the problem, which in many ways, religious people in general are part of the problem now, adding to polarization and adding to partisanship, or are we part of the solution? Part of being part of the solution is taking forgiveness practice really seriously.
We were just talking before the show about the internecine warfare among religionists of all faiths. You yourself in Israel experienced that between conservative and liberal Jews. You were there in 1980. What about current wars and conflicts where religion is a defining component?
Yeah, well, I think, look, there's low-level religion and more highly evolved religion. Religion always can do two things. Religion can actually simply stabilize and comfort you exactly where you are and affirm your group's identity, whether it's your creedal group, dogma group, tribal group, or religion can blow apart the boundaries, and religion can actually shake you up in your certainty. And I think that's a big choice that religious people have to make. Now, right now, it turns out that the most religious people tend to be the most certain. And that's a very dangerous thing, because when you invoke God, which is a kind of, whatever you mean by God, it's some ultimate authority. When you invoke God to make you more certain, that makes you a very dangerous person.
Or do you think that it's that the people who are certain are the ones who are the most likely to speak out? There might be a huge group who are in that more searching, questioning group, but are less likely to get in front of a camera and say, I speak for my religion.
I think part of it is certainty is more entertaining. When you put two certain people on opposite sides in front of the camera, when you speak about the media, certainty, two certain people fighting is a more entertaining thing. But that just is a challenge to those of us who understand that the fundamental state to be in the world most of the time is uncertain. That's whether it's mystery in the Christian community, or the uncertainty of truth in Jewish life, or the surrender aspect to something bigger than you in Islam. that aspect of what it means to be a religious and spiritual person we need to talk about. And that will require a lot of forgiveness between groups. And part of the reason we don't say I'm sorry, part of the reason within these groups we don't actually ask for forgiveness is because we don't want to show vulnerability and we don't want to show weakness on either side. Because the more liberal religious communities really need to ask themselves, how have they stereotyped the more fundamentalist communities? It's not that they're all good here. And fundamentalist communities really need to ask, where has our certainty and our aggressiveness actually been a way to avoid what deep down we're uncertain about too?
I must ask you about growing up and how you learned about forgiveness from your parents when you were a kid.
You know, it's a great question. I don't even know if I should tell this story. I haven't thought about this story. As you were asking it, my parents may kill me for this, okay? I remember...
They'll forgive you.
Yeah, yes. You know, I have 5 younger brothers, so there's 6 boys. You can imagine a lot of pressure in a family. My father's a cantor, and so you can imagine the economics of that. And my parents almost never fought. They just really treated each other kindly. But I remember one time, I must have been about 12 or 13 years old, and my parents got into a fight. And my father, who was a cantor, never raised his voice because he was an artist. He didn't want to, you know. And he raised his voice, and I remember, and he walked out of the house and slammed the door. Now, that never happened in our home. And I remember my brother and I, the one right under me, sat at the curb and said, you know, that who we go with if our parents get divorced, you know, that thing that I think all kids do at some point. And about an hour later, my father came back, and we all like were standing outside the kitchen. And he came in and he apologized. And that, I remember, was like the first public, so to speak, apology I had ever seen. And I think that really made a difference in my life. I don't even remember what the fight was about. All I remember is my father apologizing, and my mother, they hugged, and that was it. And I think that was really crucial in my life.
What do you do when you offer a sincere apology from your heart, the kind you've just described, and it's not accepted? What happens then?
You know, one of the things that we don't teach about forgiveness is forgiveness doesn't always clean up the brokenness. In America, everything has to be clean. You say, I'm sorry, you're forgiven, everything's nice. And if you can't, there's something wrong with you, you should just let go. Here's what we also need to teach. There are different levels of forgiveness. There's the kind of forgiveness you're talking about, which is really what religions call grace. And that, no matter how hard you work, that's grace. It can't be earned. Whether it's grace in Christianity or kapara, atonement on Yom Kippur, no matter what you do, you can't earn that. Now, then there are other levels of forgiveness. One of the levels of forgiveness is that you try a few times. Here's what happens. There's actually a Jewish wisdom. Try 3 times. Genuine forgiveness 3 times. And if you don't get it, watch. You'll be able to let go because you've gone through the process.
Thank you so much for being with us today.